Good evening, Joe. It's wonderful to be with you here today. Now, before we start, let me say thank you for choosing us to help you. And your five consultants today will be Amy, Dallas, Colton, Spencer, and myself, Caitlin. Now, as you may remember, we had you read The Five Dysfunctions of a Team and Do You Care to Lead? Before jumping in, I wanted to review the triangle of the five dysfunctions, as that's where many of our solutions will be stemming from. So, starting from the base, the absence of trust is caused by invulnerability. Remember that you have to build layer by layer, or your team will not be as successful as otherwise would be. The second dysfunction is the fear of conflict, which is caused by artificial harmony. The third dysfunction is lack of commitment, which is caused by ambiguity. The fourth dysfunction is avoidance of accountability, which is caused by low standards. And the fifth and final dysfunction is inattention to results, which is often caused by status and ego. We truly believe that if you are able to take these five dysfunctions and apply them to your team, this will solve many of the problems you are concerned about. To start going into this and talking about your business problem and the first dysfunction, I will hand it over to Amy.
Thank you. Yes, Joe. So we really appreciate the video that you sent us and answering our questions that we had for you. It helped us to really understand your team better and look for some of the issues that you might be having and some ways to resolve those issues. As we reviewed through the questions and really looked at your team members, what we came up with is that a big issue in your team is a lack of accountability. And really what is causing that is your team's inability to trust, avoidance of healthy conflict. There's a lack of commitment and focus. And I think as we tie this together, you'll see where that's coming from. And we believe it, again, it's tied back into that trust. And there's self-serving behavior that has caused a loss to your bottom line. And so we want to give you some solutions to how to make your team healthy and how to make your business better. Next slide. So dysfunction one, as you remember, Lencioni in the book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, he really talks about how trust is the foundation of a team. And that if you're going to have a healthy team, the first thing that you have to establish is trust. Now, some things that you notice that you reported to us is that there's a lot of strained relationships between your team members. And that really comes down to a lack of willingness to be vulnerable around each other. And also, as we'll go through this, we'll talk a little bit about healthy conflict, but there's that strain on those relationships. And because you have a strain on relationships, what you noticed is that people are really closed off during your one-to-one interviews. You feel like they're not open, they're not sharing with you. And that again goes back to that vulnerability, right? And in order to create trust, what we want to do is create psychological safety. And psychological safety is someone's ability to say something in a meeting without feeling judged or feeling like someone's going to come after them for retribution. But they feel safe to actually express their opinions and their needs and what they think. So, how does one build trust? How does one establish that psychological safety? Well, the first thing that we thought of was maybe doing a personal history exercise with your team. So, a personal history exercise is a great way to start that foundation of trust. You gather everyone together, you come up with some questions, maybe where did they grow up? Why did they choose the career they chose? Maybe experiences that they've had in their childhood that have helped develop them. And you go around the room and you talk about those questions. And then you, as the leader, are going to start off and share your answers to whatever questions you've determined. And you're going to set the tone for vulnerability in the meeting. So it's really important that you are open and upfront and honest. And then each member of the room will go around and share. And then you, as the leader, want to follow up with some follow-up questions like, what did you learn about other people? What did you think of this exercise? What did you find interesting about this? And that will start to build those relationships and lay that foundation for trust. The second is personality profiles. Personality profiles are a great way to learn about your team. The Clifton Strength Finder is amazing, can really identify your team's strengths. It also has a grid that will lay out your team's strengths and their weaknesses. And so you can see if you've got strengths and weaknesses in each area. So if you've got one team member that has a weakness in this area, you might have another team member that has a strength. And it's a great way to look at assignments and bringing your team together and sharing that information with your team. The last thing, so there's the Strength Finder, and then there's also Myers-Briggs, which can also identify personality traits and how people react to different situations. The last thing so personality profiles, the last thing we want to talk about is our 360-degree feedback. Now, I know, Joe, in your video, you weren't super excited about the 360-degree feedback and some of the feedback that you received. But part of building trust as a leader, we have to be vulnerable and we have to be open to feedback that other people are sharing with us. And even though it may not be our perception of what's happening, it is their perception. And by utilizing some of that feedback, it helps us to become a better leader because we know how to work better with people by the things that they're giving us that they need from us. And so it can be a great tool for you. It can be a great tool for your employees. And again, building trust is one of the key foundations to building your team. And now I'll turn it over to our dysfunction number 2.
Hey Joe, how's it going? My name's Colton. Going off what Amy said, so the second dysfunction is going to be the fear of conflict. So what we've noticed is that there's some personal discomfort with conflict that we've noticed in your relationships in the workplace. We feel like sometimes there's kind of a need for consensus, and sometimes it doesn't come to a consensus, and so we've noticed some discomfort there and some fear there, and then sometimes there's some in-office politics as well. And so what we recommend for you to overcome these problems and these fear of conflicts is conflict mining. So what you're going to do for that is you're going to dig deeper into what the actual root of the problem is, and you can do that through group meetings, and then you can do that through watching the behavior of the employees as well. Really just what we're trying to do is find the root cause of the conflict and then resolve that through the conflict mining. And then we also advise you that you could start some group and conflict norms. So for that group norm, what you can do is basically these are going to be guidelines for the group, so that they know how to act within the group. They know their responsibilities, and if it's basically just going to be those guidelines to work the group. And then the conflict norms is if there is a conflict that arrives within the group, there's going to be guidelines as well for that on how to resolve those quicker and easier and in an efficient way. So with that, we're going to move on to dysfunction number 3.
Hey, Joe. My name is Spencer. I know it seems like we're kind of pounding on your group right now and your team and presenting all of these ways that you're dysfunctional. But we do this because we really think you guys have a lot of potential. And if you can get some of these things that you've noticed and some of these little dysfunctions worked out, your team can be really, really successful. One of the things that we noticed when you were telling us about your team is that it seems like there's a lack of commitment between team members. And commitment can go in a lot of directions. There may be a lack of commitment between what one person is saying and another person is saying, or there may be a lack of commitment to an overall goal, or all kinds of different things. The other thing that you said that we noticed that led us to believe there's a lack of commitment is this decreased participation in team meetings. Now, like Caitlin said at the beginning of our presentation, it's really important that these things build on each other. And so one of the reasons that you have a lack of commitment with your team is that no one feels like they are safe to present their own opinion, and therefore they never get bought in because they never feel like they're heard. And so we have to get around this lack of commitment dysfunction, we have to create an environment where everyone feels like they have been heard and that their ideas were listened to, so that they then buy in. It seems counterproductive or counterintuitive to listen to all of these ideas when you have a pretty good sense of the direction you want your team to go in. But letting everyone present those ideas is exactly how they become more committed to this sense of direction that you're trying to lead the team in. Seems a little backwards. It'll be weird at first as you do this, but we promise it's totally going to work. We've seen it in many, many teams that we worked with. The other thing that really helps with helping your team members to increase their commitment is just being super clear with them. They've got to know that what they're doing on a day-to-day basis is productive toward the team's goals as a whole. And they've also got to understand exactly what you expect of them. If they're going into assignments or they are a little bit unsure, there's some ambiguity of what exactly they're supposed to be doing, then there's a really good chance they're not going to be committed to it. And that leads them to other things like habits that may be counterproductive or even harmful to the business, not because they're trying to be pains, but because they simply aren't committed because they don't recognize why their efforts are important or align with the overall goals of the organization.
Okay, now on to dysfunction number 4, the avoidance of accountability. Now, you mentioned that you noticed team members avoiding personal accountability in their work and that you didn't quite feel that your 360 was accurate. So, to combat that, first we have team rewards. Team rewards, right now, you are doing personal rewards and individual rewards. We know you like giving them out and that you like rewarding people for what they do well. But this is just furthering their incentive to further their own careers and their own ego when we really need to have them focus on becoming a good team together, which is why we want you to establish and share that these team rewards. So you get rewarded for when you work together, when you share information, and when you perform well as a team instead of as individuals. Number 2, progress reviews. These can assist your team and yourself in understanding where you are, where you're going, and what needs to be done. And doing these progress reviews will help you and your others on step number 3, which is public goals and standards. When you publish your goals and standards, they will encourage your team to hold each other accountable instead of you feeling like you have to bear the burden of keeping your team on track and focused on the results. When they know what each person has been doing and what they should be doing, they'll be able to watch each other and encourage each other along the way.
All right, excellent. Hi, Joe. So my name's Dallas. We're going to now talk about dysfunction number 5 in attention to results. So one of the first things that you mentioned in your video was the fact that you felt like your team had a lack of focus. And you also talked about that your number one goal, the big goal that you have in your whole business is profitability. But as you mentioned, that's also declining. So lack of focus, the profitability is declining. And to make matters worse, you mentioned that some tasks are being delayed, specifically with Jill and William. Now, to help combat this dysfunction, we want you to do 2 things. One, we want you to start thinking about results-based rewards. So we really appreciated the fact that you liked rewarding your team. And as Caitlin talked about, you do a lot of individual rewards, which is great, and you should continue to do individual rewards. But we also need to make sure those rewards mean something too. So if you have all these individual rewards, and the whole goal is to be more profitable, but you're not being more profitable, there's a disconnect there. And so we need to reestablish what those rewards need to be. So for example, for Jill and William, maybe you base some type of reward on the fact that they're actually getting their work done. And if they're able to do that, then you reward them. Rewards like maybe compensation, bonuses, stuff like that. But it has to be based on tangible results. And then also as a team, because we're trying to build a team here, doing a public declaration of what the results will be. So if it's going to be profitability, then you declare what the profits you're going to look for. Or if you want to define different types of goals or results that you're looking for, making sure that everyone knows what they are. So that way, everyone can be back focused. So that's how this triangle works, where we're ultimately trying to keep people more focused, more accountable, and make sure that your team is actually a team. So if you're able to do those 2 things, the inattention of results will hopefully dissipate. And so now we're going to talk about thematic goals.
All right, Joe, the grand key to all of this, if you put them all together, you get what's called a thematic goal. A thematic goal is an organization-wide goal that's singular, it's qualitative, it's got a time-bound restriction to it, and it acts like this rallying cry for the whole organization. So we'll flip to the next slide here and kind of show you an example. This example is based off of an Olympic rowing team. Okay, and this is just to demonstrate the point here. But if I was on an Olympic rowing team, one of my thematic goals for sure would be to win Olympic gold. Right? That is the key that we're all trying to hit. But there's some things we've got to do to get there, and we call these defining objectives. So in this example, I have to first qualify for the Olympics, of course. I've got to have better equipment, improve our times, and actually make the team, of course. And then you'll see down there at the bottom, there's also some standard operating objectives. And these are things that we do anyways, that we have to keep doing in addition to those defining objectives to reach our thematic goal. So in your organization, we need you to create your own thematic goal. Profitability is a great goal, but it's not specific enough to help the organization see how everything that they do aligns with that goal. Then, as you go into your meetings, you can use what's called a scoreboard, which Dallas is going to tell you about.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. So we take this thematic goal and you're going to define what that goal is going to be, something that we can rally towards. But I'm sure maybe you've watched sports, but in sports, you have a scoreboard and you can tell who's winning, who's losing. And based on that scoreboard, if I'm the coach of a team and I see that I'm losing, then I know I need to change my game plan. Or if I'm winning, I know that I'm doing great. Or if it's tied, maybe I need to make some changes. So a scoreboard could look like something like this. You take your thematic goal and those defining objectives and the standing operating objectives, and you identify where maybe you're doing well, maybe where you could do better, or maybe where you're failing. And those areas that maybe you're struggling at, that needs to be top priority. Those are the things that you need to address immediately. As the coach and leader of the team, you need to make sure that people know what the score is, know what we need to adjust to in order to get to that thematic goal. So use the scoreboard as a good measuring point. Are we winning? Are we losing? And where can we actually focus our efforts to make sure that we're a more successful team? So that's how we're going to take that thematic goal and turn it into something that's actually much more powerful and focused for your team.
All right, Joe, I know we've thrown out a lot of information at you, so we're just going to kind of go over it again and make sure that, it's really drilled into your brain. And we just really want to help you make sure that, you get some value out of this. So again, those dysfunctions are trust, fear, conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. So with trust, what we can do to overcome that is some self-awareness development tools. So like mentioned before, we can implement that 360 feedback and implement that into our workspace. For fear conflict, we can do some group dynamic systems and management. So like talked about before, conflict mining, making sure we have those guidelines for our groups and for our workplace to set up our employees to get over those conflicts. Lack of commitment, we can do some change management. So like Spencer talked about, we have the conflict mining, the buy-in, and then some clarity. Make sure that everyone knows how to change and how to become better. And you can do that through your leadership as well. Avoidance of accountability, we can do some performance management strategies. So make sure we have some team rewards going, that they really feel valued, that they feel appreciated, and that they're working towards something. For the last dysfunction, inattention to results, we're going to do some motivational systems, and we could use that public display of results. So again, just some making sure that everyone feels welcomed, awarded, and they feel good. And so what you should expect from that is some improved collaboration and communication through these systems, enhanced commitment, performance results, and some culture change. And we want to thank you for listening to us today, and hopefully you get some value out of that.
Thanks, Joe. It's been a pleasure to work with
Thank
you.
you.
Let us know if you have any questions.